know they are.
Sustainability, the discourse of regeneration. And with all this exciting change in the air, we have to ask ourselves, are we ready? Or do we? Because before we break out the streamers, I think that we need to tell another story, one that shifts us from the sacred to the profane. Because when I heard the title of this conference, my first thought was, well, if community is back, where did it go? And I've got a few ideas about this that I wouldn't mind sharing with you. If we accept Ingrid Burkett's proposition that community is a verb, not a noun, then community is about who we are and what we do in every interaction and every moment. In which case, I think where community went is to the bottom of some really long to-do lists. It's in the phone call we haven't got around to returning and the email we know we should respond to. The meeting we probably should have gone to on Monday night, but look, I was in my pyjamas. And I can't tell you how many workers and students I've spoken to who've said, oh, I'd love to go to the QLD Queensland conference, but I can't, I just have too much on. And I know many of us here have actually had to make a choice about which day we might stay for, not whether or not we'll be here for the whole conference. And I know this isn't done flippantly, but because we're wrestling with the demands on our time, and that many of us can relate to this photo, which is from Tokyo's Imperial Potato Race. And it involved contestants wearing bags on their head while racing backwards. And I look at this and I think, yeah, I have weeks like that. And in various workplaces, including my own, I listen to people play the humble brag game of workplace poker. I don't know if you're familiar with this game, it's very popular. And it goes like this. Oh God, I'm so tired. I had to work every evening last week. Yeah, I not only had to work every evening, I had to work the whole weekend. Ah. I'll see your weekend and I will raise you public holidays. I'll give you my public holidays and I'll tell you about the fact that I've taken no vacations since I started work. That's nothing. Not only have I not taken vacations, but I have never taken a day's sick leave. I dragged myself to work even though I had pneumonia. I couldn't even breathe and I gave the lecture. Rubbish. I fell out of a 10-storey building, broke every bone in my body, was in a coma, and I still turned up to work. As a side note, I really love watching Peter Westerby disrupt this dynamic on a Monday morning when he comes in while this bragging's going on. And he says, oh, I'm sorry to hear that. I went hiking. God, it was a lovely weekend. I love that kind of rebellion. But it's not only the world of work that overwhelms us. Carl Oneres notes that tempted and titillated at every turn, we seek to cram in as much consumption and as many experiences as we possibly can. As well as glittering careers, we want to take art courses, work out at the gym, read the newspaper and every book on the bookseller list. We want to eat out with friends, go clubbing, play sport, watch hours of television, listen to music, spend time with family, buy all the newest fashions or gadgets, go to the cinema, enjoy intimacy and great sex with our partners, holiday in far-flung locations, and maybe even do meaningful volunteer work. The result is a gnawing disconnect between what we want from life and what we can realistically have, which feeds this sense that there's never enough time. Our schedules are bursting at the seams. And I have to say, when I read that passage, I was really surprised because that actually sounded perfectly reasonable to me. And in fact, it's what I've been advocating for many of the people who I think of as vulnerable, a good life filled with rich experiences and relationships, interesting things to do, things to look forward to. Isn't that what we all want? We're not talking about the life of fast cars and yachts, but a life filled with interesting things. I want to be able to have a meaningful career and hang out with friends and have great sex and go to different classes and learn new things and yes, play tennis. So this kind of thinking really challenged me that we're actually wanting too much from life and that that's what's creating the busyness. But a few weeks ago, I went to my yoga class and we always start our yoga class with a beautiful meditation, you know, to help centre us and come into the space. And 15 minutes in, this woman bursts into the doors and she's dropping stuff everywhere. There's yoga mats and water bottles going left, right and centre, and she apologises and she said, I'm so sorry, I was trying to get here on time, but I was pulled over for speeding. So we're now speeding to relax. And I'm reminded of an email I received from a student. She said, "Sorry I can't make the class tonight, but I have to prepare for a dinner party." I know. She said, "What's the topic and will I miss anything important?" To both questions I responded, participation and engagement. And she replied, "Can you send me the PowerPoint slides for that?" So I wonder about this world we're creating, with knowledge on tap rather than being present and experiencing things. But what that results in is this inevitable busyness, and what we do about that. Over 20 years ago, long before the invention of the not-so-smartphone, the New York Times featured an essay about the erosion of leisure time, how the off spaces between focused activities that we used to call idle time, or relaxation, or even goofing off, are now invaded by emails, faxes and telephones, and either our work or our obsessions with being reachable can encroach on every moment of solitude and leisure. And I notice the new trend is to abhor idle time, and instead we're called to go and do classes in mindfulness. Janet Ruffing is convinced that this love of busyness is profoundly destructive to self-intimacy, intimacy with the divine, interrelationships, reflective thought, the social fabric of society, our care for our planet, and our own psychological and physical health. She says, "When I am busy being busy, my field of awareness constricts, and I tend not to notice my surroundings or other people. I tend to be unresponsive either to the needs of those who cross my path or to my own. I lose my contemplative attitude and so deprive myself of moments of beauty, surprise, delight, or love. When I am busy being busy, I avoid making time for leisure, for play, for relationships, for reflection. When I am busy, I can believe myself to be incredibly important to the scheme of things. I become indispensable, necessary. My ego becomes reassured that I am productive, accomplishing something worthwhile and of value." And I've noticed that in our introductions to each other, in that wonderful first movement of, "How are you?" we no longer say fine or well, we say busy. And given that Dasgupta was a contemporary of Mohandas Gandhi's, it feels important that I include at least one Gandhian quote tonight. And there's a story of a Western journalist who asked, "Mr. Gandhi, you've been working 15 hours a day for 50 years. Don't you think you should take a vacation?" To which Gandhi smiled and replied, "I am always on vacation." I come from a family that didn't believe in vacations. The dominant gene in my ancestry is the Protestant work ethic, so I've had the privilege over many, many years of studying busyness and devotion to work in a great deal of detail. And my conclusion is that busyness is also a form of self-defence. If we are as busy as we pretend to be, then we are too busy to allow ourselves to be affected by the pain and suffering of our world. We're too busy to be addressed personally and deeply by the social, political, or ecological disasters. We're too busy to make the connections between our own actions and the larger patterns of the world, and we can distract ourselves, at least for a moment, from our own suffering or that of another. It's how we survive a world so saturated with violence and need. Our busyness deadens our feelings and numbs our responses. And this climate of busyness and efficiency is one of the ways that we actually end up supporting escalating levels of violence in our culture. And I don't plead immunity from this. I am absolutely guilty of these same crimes against my own humanity. So this addresses as much a personal wish as it is a commentary on the sector. Because to me, are we ready means, to me, more than just do we have the right organisational structure or do we have the right analysis. It also means, have we cultivated the necessary habits of the heart?